Hello, everyone. This is Jeanette Schliega with VGA. And up next, we have the wonderful Mary Clark, who's going to be talking to us about stories from the heart, sharing family history in 10 minutes or less. So, Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeanette. And I am just pleased to be amongst all of these wonderful storytellers and genealogists. And as many of us have shared this morning, family stories, whether they be small snippets of stories or in some instances, some of us write books, they all need to be shared. So today I'm going to share two stories with you. And the first story that I'm going to share started in about 2015 when I found this ring, and I'm going to see if you can see it here. This ring here. And I didn't really know too much about the ring, but I knew it was valuable because I found it in the bottom of my father's army bag that he would always pull out and share with us when we were younger. Maybe once a year, there were some things in there that he wanted to polish or something, and he would pull it out and he would tell a few stories and then he would put it away. So I found this ring in the bottom of that bag when I was selling my parents' home, and it fell out and I picked it up and it was kind of tarnished. So I stuck it on my finger and took it home that day. So from that day until maybe about 6 months ago, this ring was just a treasure, and it helped me to create the story that you're about to see. So Jeanette, you can take it away.
November the 25th, 1946. Dear Mother, at this writing, I am taking a break in between work. In the last few weeks, I have been working harder than I have been all the time that I have been in this man's army. But outside of that, I have been doing about as good as any soldier can be doing over here in Japan. The weather has turned out better than I thought it was going to be. We have had some real heavy frost, but as yet, we have not had any snow here in the valley. But we can really see a lot of snow on the mountains, which is not very far away from here. How is everything back home these days? By the way, I hear from different people from home. All I see and hear is that people are getting married and having babies. How's Buddy and the rest doing these days? I suppose Ike is still living with her husband. Is she not? Smile. Sam was telling me that Clifford Taylor died. What was the trouble with him? Has Carl got out of the army yet? From what I hear, there are a lot of them getting out of this man's army now. That is not regular army. Is it true? By what I hear in the paper, food and other things are going up higher all the time. Are the people getting paid that much money now? Or what are they doing back there? In the last 3 or 4 weeks, we have been having quite a few USO shows, and we have a movie every evening now. By having different events of these kinds makes time go faster and also helps the soldiers get along a lot better. This job as first sergeant is quite steady at times. You can look to be called up at any time of night and you've got to go. All I say is, it is no better for me. Smile. But all in all, it is not bad. Well, I will close for this time. We'll write more later. Your son, First Sergeant L. Clark. P.S. Hope to hear from you very soon.
So what you just saw was the story that this ring helped me to create. As I was packing up my parents' home, I found all these other treasures that my father had saved. And I guess I was blessed because he was a man who not only liked order, but he liked to save things in order. And so I found letters that he wrote home to his mother. I found many documents that he saved when he was on the ship going to and from Japan. I found other pictures of other soldiers and other records that he kept. But it was that ring that inspired me to tell that story, because I didn't know he had gone to Japan. And even when he pulled that bag out, he never mentioned Japan. He served 2 tours of duty. He went to Japan, but he also served in the Korean conflict. And I knew about that because that's when he got out and he married my mother. So he always told me about that. So what I shared you with was this short story, which many of us have these stories that are shared with us. And a couple of things we know: that everybody is not a genealogist, so they don't want to listen to us blather on and on and on. But people like stories, and especially if they're short stories, because as a nation, we have short attention spans. So short stories about our families that are shared with us that maybe nobody else knows, we owe it to our ancestors to allow people to know about their stories. So pass it on. And it doesn't have to be in a PowerPoint or a video. You could write it down, you could just share it with other people in whatever form works for you. But I found this video useful because I can put it online in my family Facebook page and share this story with them. And because it's only 2 minutes, somebody's going to listen to it for 2 minutes, and they're probably going to learn something that they didn't know about my father or about our family. Last thing I want to show you, I did find this as well. This is his sterling silver bracelet that has Japan on it also. And these kind of memories make me feel like somehow I was traveling along with my father on that trip. But I encourage you to share small stories like this. And again, they don't have to be in a PowerPoint, but if you want to engage other generations, our younger people are really skilled at putting together videos. And who knows, they may share it on TikTok. It might be a cool factor that they like. So that's the first story that I want to share. And I'm going to take a sip of water before I share the second story. The second story is a story that for me began about 1998, I'll say, when I gave my mother, father, and sisters each a journal. And I asked them to just write what they remember about their experience growing up, whatever they would want to share, because I wanted to put it in a book. That was an ambitious request of my family because everybody doesn't like to journal. So what I found was what I'm going to share with you next. At the right screen. And this is my mother's story. And what I'll be doing is I'll be sharing this using her voice. And this story is about my mother, Eartha May, who you see on the right-hand side. And for her, it began when she was born in Atlanta, Georgia, in Grady Memorial Hospital in 1932. And this story will be shared from her perspective, but I'll step in as her daughter when necessary. So this is Mary right now, and I want to tell you about this journal page that I found. And this journal page is the basis of this story. So who knew that one page would have so much value? Who knew that an empty page would turn into a priceless treasure by a few simple words that were written about memories that happened 61 years ago? And who knew that these words on this journal page would turn into this story 87 years later? That's the power of family history. And this is Eartha's story. So my name is Eartha, and I was born in 1932. And this is the only picture that I have of me as a baby. My father named me Billy because he wanted a boy. My daughter gave me a journal in the late 90s. And somewhere in there, because I don't really like to write too much, I decided to write a little bit because I wanted to support my daughter. I only completed one page, but I didn't realize how important those words would be to my daughter many years later. Now, this is the only picture of me as a baby, and that's my doll, the only toy that I had. And this is the journal page. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it said. It said I was born and married, and I lived in Georgia. And I don't know much about Georgia because I was kind of young. And then we moved to Florida. We lived in Pensacola in 1936 in a little house way back in the woods. And there was a nice pond near this house. And I guess that's where I learned about fishing. I think I was about 4 years old. There was no one to play with, nothing else to do, but I did have a toy that was my Raggedy Ann doll, which I kept until it fell apart. My dad worked in a logging camp. Sometimes he trapped alligators, picked cotton, and got mixed up with some people that was making white lightning, whiskey. It was at a backwoods still. And I remember it well. The revenuers or the police came to our house one night. They knocked on the door and they told my dad he was under arrest. So this picture is my dad's prison picture. And the prison record says that it was for cattle larceny. And he was in prison from March 4th, 1937 until November 11th, 1938. And Mary needs to step in and tell you a few things about this right now. What happened, how we found this record, was I was having a conversation on the phone with my research partner, and shout out to research partners, everybody needs one, Oris Jenkins. And Oris and I were talking about random things. And I told him that I found this picture that matched some information in this journal page that I had found of my mother's. And I spoke about how unique it was that somebody 4 years old would have such vivid memories. And because I especially had checked them on the records to see, if in fact my grandfather was in prison. And while I was talking, Oris pulled up this prison record that I showed you. And yes, in fact, he was in prison in 1937. And I thought, how unique that my mother remembered something that long ago to write it. So this had to be one of her first memories at 4 years old that stayed with her until she was well into her 70s. So as you listen to your stories from your elders, know that many of them may be true because they were ingrained in them for whatever reason. But I am so thankful that not only did my mother remember this story, but that she shared it with me on this one page of this journal that I found. One page, that's all she shared. So let me get back into the story. And this is Eartha coming back to you. So while my father was in prison, my mom and I, we lived with people in Georgia, in Florida, and also in Alabama, which was where we were from originally. My mom had to work for people to clean houses because we didn't have any money. And I remember we lived with this one nurse. Her name was Miss Broxton. and her mother lived with us as well, and her name was Miss Molly. Miss Molly was old, but Miss Molly was my friend because when my mom worked during the day, I stayed with Miss Molly, and she was always really nice to me. Well, eventually my dad did get out of prison, and when he got out of prison, him, along with many other people, moved from Geneva and Coffee County, Alabama, and they moved to Vassar, Michigan. This was part of the Great Migration, and there were jobs. So we stayed in Alabama until my dad was able to find a place for us. And so he found a place, and we moved to Vassar with him. This is a picture of my dad, Joe, and me. This is the only picture I have with my dad. And I cherish this moment because we had been fishing. We had a fishing space behind our house, which was called the Vassar River. And so I would go fishing almost every day. So I don't have too much more to share with you about this story, but I want my daughter to step in and tell you why it was important for her to share my story with you. So this is Mary, and I want to let you know that not only was I grateful that my mother only wrote one page in her journal, it was things that I would have never known, and no one else would have ever known had I not shared it in this format. And so what I learned from this is that even if it's one page, the treasure that it holds is priceless. And what I owe to my mother and my other ancestors is to tell as many stories as possible. And again, they're short stories because our history is American history. And I realize that there are so many things that I've been able to do because of the things that my grandmother and grandfather, my mother, and all the ancestors experienced. I am living the life of my ancestors' wildest dreams, and I deserve not only to share their stories, but to magnify the beauty that they have provided for me and the ability to have these stories to share. Now, I'm going to continue to tell stories, and 3 stories that I have that I want to share is of my grandmother, Mary, who is to the right on this page, and my great-grandmother, Lily, and my grandmother, Ida, on the left of this page. And so I encourage you to tell those stories, short stories, in any format. And when you tell them, make sure that you share them so that our ancestors can be honored in a way that they deserve. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was very touching, both of the stories. Thank you.
My pleasure.